A conversation can change your life. We are two ordinary women looking to have extraordinary and authentic conversations. Our desire is for this to be a place where all are welcome, to come as you are, willing to emotionally grow, gain confidence, and tap into your internal wisdom.
When you know and utilize your strengths, the capacity to be forgiving, kind, and encouraging is increased exponentially. We all have amazing strengths and positive attributes, so let's learn from each other. We are delighted you are here on this journey with us and hope you will invite a friend to join you here. Welcome.
Excellence is the result of caring more than others think is wise, risking more than others think is safe, dreaming more than others think is practical, and expecting more than others think is possible. Welcome to the podcast on perfectionism versus good enough. I'm Connie Wilder with my podcast partner, Sue Riekels. We're delighted that you are here. Excellence, that focus on excellence versus perfection will get us a tremendous amount. Sue, what do you want to add to the topic that we're going to discuss today?
Well, thank you for that opening and acknowledging what excellence is, because I think that is part of this topic of perfectionism versus good enough. And when we are striving for excellence, we're actually working towards something, right? And it's never going to be perfect. None of us are perfect. But how do we notice when it is good enough? And I think the piece that I think of when we talk about perfectionism and good enough is that when we're striving for perfectionism or for perfect, oftentimes it paralyzes us. Because if I can't do it perfect, I might not even try it. And a wise person once told me, trying and not achieving your actual goal is still more movement than not trying at all or not doing anything. Connie, what are your thoughts on the action behind perfectionism versus good enough, and any other thoughts you might have?
Number one, I think that people, women in particular, I think men do this as well, but women are incredibly, shall we say, gifted at not asking the question because we're busy perfecting the question, or not asking for the raise because you know what, we would do that work for no charge. That's just who I am. I just love these people so much. And so, those are two examples of the workplace in which people give away their power, if you will. And so when are we going to be good enough to ask that question and know that that question doesn't need to be perfect, because you are not perfect. And in fact, if you have the perfect question, your articulation of that question is probably not going to be perfect. And so that in and of itself is a question that ought to be asked, because it's highly likely that other people in the audience have the same question as the one that you may ask. I want to say that there's a tremendous amount of gain to be had by people, by women especially, moving forward with accepting of who they are and what they are and their gifts.
Thank you, Connie. I love your explanation and how you've seen it, especially amongst women, men as well, and how it can impact us. I'm going to be very transparent here, and I hope you don't mind. Even our recording of this podcast, it's unedited, and Connie and I do not watch it until it is posted. And part of that is it is good enough. And we could easily be critical of this or that or any of the things. And if we did that, we wouldn't have done this. We would never have probably put it out there. So I think the struggle is real. And how can we lift each other up? And I know Connie has been a wonderful person to do this with, because together we support each other, we can be vulnerable, and nobody is critical of the other, but really holds the space with love and compassion. And so I'm curious, Connie, as you think about perfectionism and good enough, what role does compassion for our fellow sisters have, perhaps, and for men as well, What role does compassion have as
Well,
we struggle with this and move forward?
Sue, it's so funny that you are asking about compassion right in this second, in this moment, because for those of you who know me, know that I'm big on the language that we choose, and that the word try is on my list of powerless words, which is in my office right there. And so the trying piece, like, it's in Star Wars, Yoda, there's no try. In fact, sometimes I'll ask people, I want you to try to stand up, and you either commit to it or you don't commit to it, versus a networking meeting, and we say, oh, we're going to try to be there, right? And so what I've learned through the years is that I'm going to try to make it is a slow no at best. And so compassion for people matters. And compassion in this world where we don't have to be right. And I will tell you that that's one of the things that I love about working with you, is that we don't have to be right.
And thank you for that. And oftentimes we're not right. But our hope is to get people to think and to be right in their own thoughts and hold themselves compassionately. But yes, I love that. Another thought I have, and that is, what happens when we're in a role that actually strives for a level of perfection? And I'm going to give two examples that just come quickly to mind. And that is a surgeon. None of us wants necessarily a good enough surgeon. We want an excellent surgeon. Now, I hope that we all know that there isn't perfect, but an excellent surgeon would be better than a good enough one. Same thing as I watched the Blue Angels last summer perform, and they're getting within 6 inches of each other, going 400, maybe it's even 600, whatever, fast. You can't mess up. I wrote it down because what they say is we strive for perfection and will accept excellence.
Wow, that's excellent.
And I think, yeah, as they're going within 6 inches of each other, going at really high speeds, they still recognize there is no perfect. And I think that is the case with all of us, but especially if you're in a role that does require this level of excellence. Connie, what are your thoughts on the differing degrees of excellence as well?
Well, it's super important that we recognize that we as women, and it's interesting because there are exceptions to this, absolutely. Yet I didn't come to the planet to be a C plus player. I came to be an A plus player. And so does that mean that I hit A plus every single day? No, absolutely not. And yet does my work make an intention to hit excellence? So much so that I put it on the back of my business card, which what I read that started this episode. And so are there varying degrees? Yes. Are we women who care about the way in which we perform? Yes. And so is there room for good enough on some things? Because yes, there is. Yet, am I someone who wants to be known as, oh, she's good enough, right? She's a good enough, fill in the blank. And yet, I strive for excellence in my business. I strive for excellence as a mother. I strive for excellence as a wife. I strive for excellence in nearly every role that I have. And does that mean I hit it? No, absolutely not. In fact, most days I do not hit it. Yet, that's where the compassion comes in. Sue, how about you?
Well, thank you for sharing that. And similarly, but I think when I heard you talking, what I noticed was it's not about the achieving the excellence. Yes, we're striving, but it's how in which those around us hold our less than perfect ways and our good enough outcomes. And if we can start to hold each other with compassion with their good enough outcomes, might there be enough space for them to hold ours as well, is what kind of came to my mind. And that is not being critical, not being judgmental of each other, but really embracing that sometimes we fall flat, but good for you for trying. And where do you want to take this next time versus, wow, did you see what happened to her? And I think we can extend criticism and do damage versus that compassion and encouragement where at least you tried, like, way to go.
Yeah.
And as a female, I don't think I have experienced that much. And I know that I have a long way to go in continuing to improve and embody that. So it's an ongoing process. But my hope and dream is that more of us can continue to work on it. So together it gets better.
Yeah, definitely. There was a time when I was in Las Vegas on a business trip, and it was a speech coach that I was going to see, and she had a mastermind going on, and I was part of her cohort, this mastermind. And so we got to meet in person twice a year. This is pre-COVID, when it was 2018. And so I was standing in the audience, and one of the people, there were about 12 women on stage, and one of the women said, "I will hold space for you." And it was as if she was speaking directly to me. She was not. She was simply saying that she will hold space for one of the other women who were on stage. And yet at that time, I heard her say that, and that's all I needed. I had 2 young children at home. They were about 4 years old. They were twins. And I was like, whoa. I mean, I was having difficulty finding my oxygen, right? And hearing that woman say, "I will hold space for you," I was like, wow, that's all I need. I don't even need the help. I just need the thought of somebody holding space for me. And so I think that also speaks of that compassion, that enormous, enormous compassion.
Well said. And again, like you said, maybe not directed exactly at me, but I felt it. There was an energy behind that compassion and that space holding that you could still feel, whether it was directed for you or not. And I think that is the piece when we extend that out. People notice it, they feel it. And I don't know about you, but I know people who I'm like, when I'm in their presence, wow, I can feel their energy and their almost like their whole body's smiling. And what a difference that makes versus someone who is really sad or really down. It feels different. So lifting each other up in this, I think, is a key piece. Beautiful, Connie.
Yeah, yeah. And Sue, the energy is contagious, whether we are paying attention to it or not. The energy is contagious. So what you just said about feeling it, about feeling someone smile and internalizing that, we do that all the time, not knowing it, not knowing that we actually do that, and that the energy is contagious. So absolutely, absolutely.
I'm also curious, Connie, what you think of, does perfection take more time than good enough? And the amount of energy, again, and time. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Perfection can take a lot more energy. If I'm over here busy trying to perfect something, and a lot of my facilitation, I over prepare. And so I'm a huge fan of preparedness. I'm a huge, huge fan of being prepared, of taking the time to prepare. And yet, what I find myself doing is I over prepare for most things. I over prepare in that I've got all these examples of ideas to share or exercises that we could do when I'm facilitating. And so this work that you and I are doing on this podcast, you had stated earlier that we do not watch it, and we don't. And part of that is so refreshing to me, because if I know where I'm starting and I know where we're stopping, I can navigate well in between there. I've got years of experience, of wisdom, and lots of things to draw on, if you will. So yeah, there's a big component, a big element of trust, of trusting ourselves that my stuff is good enough. And does perfection take longer? Absolutely.
Connie, thank you. And I love what you said was prepared and not perfect. Because prepared isn't about perfectionism, but it is being prepared. And like you said, I can fill in the blanks as long as I'm prepared. And I love that mindset. And there's a balance to that. It feels balanced then. Like I come prepared and equipped, and there is this level of balance in that. And so hopefully that also comes across when we are showing up prepared, but not perfect.
Yeah, definitely.
Beautiful. Connie, anything else you would like our listeners to hear today as we start to wrap up on this topic of perfectionism versus good enough?
Well, I want to encourage our listeners, Sue, to go for it, if you will, to go for it, to ask the question, to go first, to ask for the raise, any of that stuff. Be the change that you wish to see in the world, and know that we are behind you 1,000%.
Well said, Connie. And I will double down on that and say, go out and be the change. Lift each other up while you also lift yourself up. Together, we can strive for excellence, come prepared, and yet have balance in the good enough.
Remember, a conversation can change your life. We invite you to be the best version of yourself. When you feel better, you do better.
We welcome hearing from you. To learn more about us, suggest topics to be discussed, or to reach out to us directly, visit our websites listed in the notes below. Thank you for being